So I've been away for a while.
That's because I've been working on this. So yeah, I spent all this time making a 3D printed Stormtrooper suit using that 3D printer. And if you're crazy enough to do this yourself, well, here's how I did it. So the plastic I used is called PETG. It's a very lightweight yet durable plastic. It's commonly found in soda bottles, and for my case, it was perfect for cosplay type armor. To actually make this suit, I needed around 10 rolls of filament, and for each of these going around $23, it cost me about $230–240 to actually print everything out.
I also bought the suit model off the website do3d.com for $80, and it promptly went on sale a week later for almost half the price. Shit happens.
Alright, so we got a 3D model and a butt ton of plastic. Time to get to work.
As for the 3D model, no custom sizing was provided from the designer, so I had to figure out on my own how to get this suit sized correctly.
So the files I received are meant for someone who's around 6 feet tall, which is right around where I'm at height-wise. However, width-wise, I'm kind of a thinner guy. So I need to play around with the file's dimensions a bit in a piece of software called a slicer. You see, 3D printers are surprisingly dumb machines. My Prusa over here has the same processing power as a Super Nintendo from over 30 years ago. But you see, the printer doesn't really need to think. That's what we got the splicing software for.
This software does everything from setting the temperature, building supporting materials, and controlling the size of objects. It then spits out all that data into bite-sized instructions that this dumb little guy can understand.
So yeah, that slicing software is what I used to size up all the individual pieces for the armor.
Basically, I took each piece and cut a small section and compared that to the width of my body. That way, if something didn't fit right, I only spent around 30 minutes making a test piece as opposed to several days for the full object.
So while the resizing worked for the width of the pieces, I couldn't really do that for the height, and that kind of screwed me over in some places, like with the forearms, where it's a little too long and I can't bend my arms or my wrists all the way because they're just too long. So I'm gonna have to fix that at some point in time. So while I had all the pieces sized to fit my body, the last thing I needed to do was to get them to fit on a 21 by 25 centimeter print bed square.
Which is why I took all these carefully constructed pieces and hacked them all to bits. I made a quick layout of all the individual pieces that I needed to slice. Just for the body alone, this required 65 separate pieces to be printed, totaling 36 days, 7 hours, and 35 minutes. And that's not including any of the failed prints or objects that needed to be reprinted because they were sized wrong.
Like the butt!
Additionally, another 14 pieces needed to be printed for the helmet.
So in total, it took 43 days to print all these pieces, and that's not including any of the failures or the reprints. Alright, so after all that fussing about, we now have the model size to fit both myself and the 3D printer's small print bed. So now we can get to work actually printing the damn thing.
I started first with printing out the helmet. Each of the print layers was set to a decent resolution of 0.15mm thickness, so each of the print layers was a little less noticeable. As for the body pieces, such as the arms, thighs, shins, chest, and waist, well, these were printed at a layer height of 0.2mm to speed things up a bit. Most of the pieces had an infill density between 30 and 40%, depending on how much strength was needed. Just so you're aware, the infill density is how much empty space is within the plastic. So if I chose 40%, that means 40% of the inside of the pieces is filled with plastic and the remaining is just open air. After printing, each of the individual pieces is very rough. Both visually and texturally, each of the print layers is very noticeable.
So to remedy this, I had to do a lot of sanding, and I mean a lot of sanding.
I started with 120 grit sandpaper and hand sanded every piece in the suit. This cleared up a lot of the visual print layers for each of the pieces. Surprisingly, the easiest way to tell which areas needed sanding was done audibly, not visually. Since each of the print layers created large grooves in the plastic, scraping the sandpaper against these created a very similar scratching sound to that of like a vinyl record. So I could tell something was fully sanded when that vinyl scratching sound became way less pronounced.
After 120 grit sandpaper, it was time for even more sanding.
This time, I upgraded to 240 grit sandpaper. This helped provide both a smoother texture for the pieces and cover up any large gashes caused from the fuck-ups of the 120 grit. In total, it took me roughly a half hour to do this hand sanding for each piece.
So after hand sanding all 74 pieces, if I just had to estimate a half hour for each piece, that was like 36 hours of sanding. I actually tried using one of those motorized handheld sanders, but I actually found the friction from that caused the plastic to melt, so I had to do it all by hand.
After several weeks of getting all this crap sanded and smoothed down, it was time to glue it all together. For a large majority of the pieces, I used JB Weld plastic glue. This stuff was awesome and it's a must-have for anyone with a 3D printer. You just squirt a little from the syringe and mix the two parts together before slathering it in all the places needing glue. For any of the pieces that had gotten warped or had gaps present, I used a hardening epoxy clay. Again, it's another two-part solution that is mixed together before it's applied to all the necessary areas.
So guess what comes next after all the gluing? More sanding.
Yep, more sanding with the 220 grit was needed to smooth out all the excess glue and epoxy areas.
So after at least 45 hours of sanding, you think my OCD would let up a little bit.
Well, we still have these big gaps where everything was glued, so it's now time to bust out the Bondo spot filler. Imagine a sandy and slightly runny hummus substance that dries in around a minute. I slathered this stuff all over the glued areas to fill in any gaps missed by the glue. Side note, do not use this spot filler stuff with vinyl gloves. I ended up needing to get disposable latex gloves since the vinyl ones completely disintegrated from this stuff.
So after that, you guessed it, more sanding.
At least the sanding on the spot filler was much easier to do than the bare plastic. At most, it took me like 10 minutes for each piece. Afterwards, the glued areas are much less noticeable now that everything is on the same level. Well, alright, they'd be less noticeable if it wasn't bright red, but texturally, everything was feeling pretty good.
Finally, we can get to some painting.
I got some special primer filler that was highly recommended online for 3D prints. Basically, this primer slightly foams out and fills in any of the print gaps or imperfections in the plastic. One of the bad things about this being a filler primer is that it ran out very quickly. I needed 8 cans just for a proper first layer covering.
There's a nest.
Also, you may have noticed something on the can, but... So yeah, we're not done with the sanding. After applying the primer, you gotta sand off all the excess bits that's foamed up. I first did a light sanding with the 220 grit paper, then finished things off with a 400 grit sandpaper for a nice smooth surface. So now it's time for the white paint. A bit ironic that we started with white plastic, but we still need a bunch of white paint to complete the look. Considering I'm painting all this in a back alleyway, I think everything turned out pretty great. However, I did screw up in several spots and had the spray can a bit too close to the plastic. So that caused some very noticeable dripping, which required more sanding. 400 grit was used to initially scrape off the excess paint, then 1000 grit was used to smoothen things up. After cleaning up any mistakes, a second coating of white paint was applied. Finally, a clear matte finish was applied to everything to protect the paint job and clean up any painting defects.
So the painting process may have been finished, but the assembly process sure wasn't. For example, with the helmet, because there's both white and black bits, I painted those separately to avoid any overspray.
There's also this mesh filter looking bit that's on the bottom portion of the helmet, but trying to use the printer to make this resulted in a hot, gooey plastic mess. So I bought some wire mesh and used the Dremel to cut this roughly to size. With the mesh in place, I now had to figure out how to create the actual lens for the mask itself. So I overpaid for these absolute crap visor sunglasses. But after covering them in tons of epoxy and glue, they fit perfectly in the Stormtrooper helmet. Although I did have to fill the helmet with a bunch of CDs and any bullshit I could find on hand just to keep these in place until the glue actually dried.
So next up, I had to find a way to get these pieces to stick to each other so I could form a suit that I could actually wear.
I started with the chest piece, using some heavy-duty neodymium magnets. These magnets did an awesome job at securing the top portion of the chest. However, these magnets are pretty expensive and I'm already hitting the $400 mark on this project, so for everything else, I'm using Velcro. I found a roll of Velcro at the local craft store where one of the ends already had a strong gooey adhesive applied, so I lined up the edges for the chest, abs, and legs and applied the Velcro in place. To further secure the chest and abs from sliding around, I made some small keyed plastic pieces and glued those to the edges. This way, I'll know each piece is in the correct position when the plastic fits snugly in the corresponding hole. I then used additional Velcro for securing the butt and cod piece to the abs of the suit. In addition, Velcro was used to hold the shoulder pads in place while allowing for flexibility during movement. While all this Velcroing was going on, I also started gluing a bunch of foam to the inside of the plastic. The foam is surprisingly important since lots of the pieces like the arms and legs are held onto my body mostly from the friction. The foam was used to keep the plastic snug and in place against my body.
So I originally wanted to use a latex cat suit as an undersuit for all this, but considering all the sharp plastic pieces, I ended up nixing that idea. I didn't want to rip anything.
In addition, the friction of the foam wasn't enough to keep the thighs of the suit from slipping off my legs. So I repurposed an old Batman Sentai and sewed on more Velcro to hold the thighs in place.
So after 6 months of all that hard work, we finally have a fully formed Stormtrooper suit, and I wasted no time breaking this bad boy in.
So yeah, I wore this suit to Gear Blast USA and got some trooper initiation training. Also went to a Halloween parade 2 weeks later, and then I went to MIR a week after that. I even got to say hello to the What's the Safe Word dudes while all troopered up. After that, it was off to the Chicago Comic and Entertainment Expo, or C2E2. And that was a lot of fun too. Got to meet some of the 501st guys from that.
Furry scum! Prepare to die!
Wait! Was it worth it?
Wait, what?
Was it worth it?
So, was it worth all this work? Well, kind of. It really depends on where you're coming from. In my case, we had the pandemic going on, and I was looking for some good social distancing activities to do. And I'm the kind of person that enjoys spending $600 or $700 on a 3D printer, as opposed to buying the suit outright for like $2,000. So, in my case, I very much enjoyed it. I've already been getting a ton of wear out of this suit, and I definitely plan on using it for the future. So in that case, yeah, I'd say it was worth it. Just be warned, if you're taking on this challenge yourself, be prepared for a shitload of sanding. So that was it. Thank you all for sticking around till the end of the video. Big thank you to everyone who subscribed. We just recently broke 10,000 subscribers, which is like mind-blowing to me considering how niche this content is. So I want to thank everyone's love and support for keeping this channel going, and I will see y'all in the next video.